Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video we'll learn to read music notation, the staff, clefs, ledger lines, and the grand staff. Let's start with the concept of the staff. The staff is made of 5 parallel lines, so that you write them horizontally as you can see here. It indicates the pitch going from bottom to top. So the lower it is on the staff, the lower the pitch it is, the higher it is on the staff, the higher the pitch it is. Okay? It also indicates time flowing from left to right, just like you read any book. The notes can be fit on the lines or between them. As you can see here, we can fit around 11 notes. But then what if we need to go higher in pitch or lower in pitch? What can we do? So what we do is we visually extend the staff by adding ledger lines. And so the ledger lines, they are like mini staffs themselves. We can add as many as we need, either above the staff or below the staff. And when we are filling the notes here, we can also put on the lines of the ledger lines or between them. Here are some of the examples. So you see this one is just above one ledger line. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4 on the 4th ledger line above the staff. This is on the 1st ledger line below the staff. This is on the 4th ledger line below the staff. And this is just below the 2nd ledger line below the staff. But then how do we know which note on the staff represents which actual note? These are without any reference, and we have a lot of notes on the piano. How do we know which one, each one of those is which sound exactly? And this is where we get into the concept of the clef. So basically the clefs are symbols which let us know, which give us a reference points on the staff, so that we know exactly when we position a note on the staff, which sound, which actual note on the keys it represents. There are 3 clefs that are commonly used. We have the G clef, which is on the left. This one typically represents the high ranges. There is the C clef, which you see in the middle here. This one represents the mid ranges. And then we have the F clef, which is here on the right, and you see the shape of it. This one represents the low ranges, so more bass. So more bass on the F, more middle on the C, and more treble on the G clef. So let's start with the G clef, which is the most commonly used. The G clef points to the G4 note, which is this one. And you see how it's written. Basically, it starts from here, and then you go kind of loop, and then you loop back, and so on. So this point is on the G4 line. And what it indicates is the 2nd line from below is the G4. If we're using this clef, this means that this line is a G4. Okay, this is the most common setup or position of the G clef. There are some exceptions. We're not very interested in exceptions. We're more interested in what is most commonly used right now. So what does this mean is when I see a G clef on a staff like this, I can automatically know the position of any note. So wherever you write notes on the staff, I can already know, starting from G4, what are the relative notes. So if I see one that is here in between the gaps, I can count G, A, B, C. Then it would be a C5, and so on. This is what looks like the range from C4 to C6 on the G clef. Again, 2nd line is a G4. We are here, and so we can go down to C4, and from here we can go up to C6. So basically you remember the C4, that's the middle C. So if I play those, basically we have this. Straightforward. You can know which note is anywhere on the piano keys just by the reference that we have for G4, because we have the G clef in the beginning. So moving to the C clef, the C clef itself has quite some variations depending on the type of instrument that is being used. The most common variation is this one here that is in the middle, and it points to the middle line, and the C clef basically points to C4, the same middle C that we learned about, this one. So in any variation that we use, it will always point to C4. So if we're using this one here on the left side, then the middle of it basically points to the lower line, and the C4 then is on the lower line. Or if you use the second one, then here the middle is pointing to the second line, and so the C4 is the second line. You remember where the G clef was? Here is the same position, but in this case we are talking about the C4. So it's the same exact note. This is the middle on the middle line, and this is on the fourth line from the bottom, also C4, and then this is on the top line, also C4. So you see where you put the clef is where you get the note starting, but it's always pointing to C4. That's the most important part to know here. So if we're using the most common configuration, which is in the middle, this is what it looks like when we have the range between C3 and C5. You notice that we are 1 octave lower than the G clef, basically. So C3 is here, and then we go up to C5. Okay, that's why it focuses more on the mid-ranges, basically, of the piano keys. And finally, we move to the F clef. So the F clef, if you recall, is more about the bass sounds. It's really the lower pitch. And there are 3 variations that exist for the F clef. One is this one here on the left. By the way, all F clefs, they refer to F3. So F3 is here. Okay. So the first variation is where it points to the middle line. And you see here the dot of it. It starts from here. And then you have those 2 points that highlight where to look. And so in this case, this would be the F3. Or this case, with the fourth line from below, the F3 would be here positioned. Or at the top line, also it will refer again to the F3. The most common one is the one in the middle here, where it refers to the fourth line from below. Okay, so but wherever you put it, it will always indicate F3. So let's take the most common example that we talked about. And here we're gonna map out from C2 to C4. So again, 1 more octave lower. So our C2 is here. And you will see everything is relative to this F3. So always this line is F3. And then we can walk down or walk up basically from that reference point. So this is extremely important to know which clef you are, to know which notes you're playing. So let's do basically C2, D2, E2. And that's C4. Again, our middle C. Okay. Now, in each clef, of course, with the staffs that we use, we can still go above or below. But these are the common ranges that we work with, basically. So now let's go to the concept of the grand staff. So if we're playing piano and we want to represent the notes on a piano, you remember the piano is very wide in range, and it's very difficult to write all the notes of the piano in just one single staff. So what we have for the piano specifically, but also exists to some of the other wide range instruments, is what we call the grand staff. And so the grand staff is a combination of a top staff that has a G clef on it and a bottom staff that has an F clef on it. And we can see here that the top staff with a G clef, basically the reference on the second line is on the G4, and the bottom clef, the reference is for F3. Also on the second line from the top or fourth line from the bottom. Now what happens is we can go up in the F clef. At some point it's more worth to start from the bottom of the G clef. So there is some overlap. There are some notes that you can either choose to write them on the F clef staff or on the G clef staff, but that would be the exact same notes. The preference is usually depends on which hand you're playing, and that's the piano approach basically. Or when it comes to voice leading, depends which voice is doing the singing. Even if the notes coincide, for like soprano or alto, you will always write them in the G clef, while for the tenor and the bass, you will write them, for example, always in the F clef. So let's just take a look at some of the examples, random examples that are mapped out here. So we start with the first one. This is the G4. So you can see, you know it, it's on the line. of the G clef anyway, so the G4 is here. Okay. The second one is the D5, so we go from G, A, B, C, D5. The third one, it's an A3, so from G4, okay, we are here, we go down, F4, E4, D4, C4, now we are in B3, and then A3. So you see how it works, right? Here we have this note is just below the line of the F3, so the F3 is here, and so this is an E3, it's right here, okay? On the other hand, here we added one with the 3 ledger lines, and so that's an E6, and the way we want to reach it is we are here, we start from here. Of course, those you will need to know them by heart later on, but this is basically, it's always the same systematic way. So we are at the G4, then we go A, B, C, we are C5, D5, E, F, G, A, B, now we are in C6, D6, E6, and that's E6 here. On the other hand, we can also go below here with the ledger lines. So we are starting from F3, and then we walk down. E3, D3, C3, B2, A2, G2, F2, E2, D2. This one is interesting here. That is the C4. C4, you can write it basically on the F clef. You can also write it on the G clef. On the G clef, it will be on the first ledger line below the staff. And the F clef, it will be on the first ledger line above the staff. And then you can walk it up from here. So basically F, G, A, B, and that's a C4. Middle C right here. And you see here the note right after it is a D4. So the C and then D, and here I'm writing it on the different staff, and so basically it's here. You can walk it down from the G, or here you can walk it up from the F. And then lastly, you can see that even on any staff you can really extend further, although typically this note is more common to see it on the G clef, but you can write it on the F clef if it's a voice related to, for example, tenor or bass, or is played by the left hand on the piano. It's better sometimes to refer it, to show it that it's belonging to the bass clef, to the F clef in this case. This is an F4, so it's basically here. And in this case, we're walking it up from here. It's a whole octave above the F3. So this is F3, G3, A3, B3, C4, remember, is the same as here, D4, E4, and then F4. And here, of course, we can combine. As I showed, there is some overlap. There are some notes you can show them one way or another, and the others, they're typically sitting in a certain staff. This is basically the range from C2 to F6. So our C2 is here. And that's F6. And again, if you get lost, if you need reference points, always look. The G clef is pointing to the G4, and the F clef is pointing to the F3. And with those, basically, you cannot get lost. Of course, over time, you would memorize by heart, visually. You would know exactly which note is where, but that just needs experience and practice. And that's it for now. If you have any question, go ahead and write it in the comment section. I will make sure to answer as soon as I can. If you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe for more. I will be posting 2 lessons per week to help you in your learning journey. I wish you a fantastic musical day.